Hey YouTube, it's me Spotty, hope you're all doing great. Today we were meant to have a weekly cubing topical, but instead I thought I would mix things up a bit and tell you guys a story instead. So I said I would tell you guys a story, but actually I'm going to tell you 3 separate stories. And these are of the weirdest encounters I guess I've had with a non-cuber. So coming in at number 3 is when I was at school one day and I had brought a YJ Sulong to school. And it was my first ever cube, so you know, it was pretty new at the time I think, and I was just really excited to have it, so I brought it to school. But anyway, I had that cube in the front pocket of my bag and I was gonna get something else out from the front pocket of my bag, and one of my friends saw that Rubik's Cube, so they were like, oh my gosh, that's a Rubik's Cube, because, you know, they're smart people, and they asked if they could try it. So, of course, I let them play with it, and they were just messing around with it for a bit, and they asked me if I could solve it, and, you know, the gist of it. But then they started this conversation with me, and they were like, oh, do you have a real Rubik's Cube? And I was like, do you mean like a Rubik's brand Rubik's Cube? And they were like, oh yeah, you know, the real ones, the actual genuine ones, not this cheap, fake, Chinese, weird, not real Rubik's Cube. It probably didn't actually go like that, but that's the gist of it. And I was like, oh yeah, I have a Rubik's brand if that's what you're talking about. And they were like, yeah, well, you know, those ones are so much harder to solve. And I was like, oh no, they're the same thing, you know, they both have 6 sides and 6 colors and 9 colors of that on one side, if that makes sense. And they were like, no, this one's not as difficult, you know, the real ones are so much more difficult. The real ones actually takes a lot more skill to solve. And they were very intent on that, and I let it go, but I don't really know why they thought that. Like, it was exactly the same thing. The only thing that I could think of was if they meant by harder to turn, because Rubik's brands are normally stiff and, well, terrible puzzles. But yeah, that was not really weird, that was just an annoying encounter. But it was my friend and we're good now. The second story I have is also at school, and this one's a lot shorter, so I'll keep it short and sweet. But basically, by this point, I didn't normally bring cubes to school anymore. But today, well, the day that I'm telling the story in, today I brought my Cyclone Boy's Feiwu to school because I was going to lend it to one of my friends. So anyway, I was walking to class and I was going to see him walking to class, so I had it in my hand and I was going to give it to him. And there was this guy who was sitting on the bench, sort of, I don't know why he was sitting on the bench. Maybe it wasn't walking to class. Maybe it was like at lunchtime or something. Either way, he was sitting on the bench and he called out to me and he was like, hey, is that a fake Rubik's Cube? And I was like, no, it's a real Rubik's Cube, you know. And I walked away because there was not really too much to it. I didn't really stop by for a conversation or anything. But I was sort of confused because, well, it was a real Rubik's Cube. It wasn't like I was just holding this block of plastic that didn't turn. The only thing that I could think of was also that it was a stickless puzzle, so maybe it didn't look like a traditional cube. But yeah, I'm not really sure what he meant by that. But the weirdest encounter I've had with someone who doesn't cube is definitely when I was showing my barrel to my mum. And this is kind of a funny story. I thought it was pretty funny at the time, but anyway, I was showing my barrel to my mum because I just finished making it. And I was like, oh, hey, do you want to see what I've made? And she was looking at it and she was pretty impressed because, you know, it looked cool. It wasn't just an ordinary Rubik's Cube, but it was, well, yeah, it looks pretty cool. And she was like, oh my gosh, this has 6 colors on it. And I was like, yeah, it has 6 colors, like, you know, every other cube I've got. And she was like, what? I thought they only had 4 colors. But yeah, those were my 3 stories. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, feel free to smash that like button and don't forget to subscribe to be notified of future content. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day. This square one is the best on the market. I'm not going to deny it, but it's not perfect by any means. Most people love it, and from what I've seen, nobody who has this square one uses a different one. Either way, I could rant about how this is the best square one on the market, how it has the greatest turning, and it's the only one with corner cutting. But instead, I'm going to highlight 3 flaws that the square one has. The first flaw